clubs who are spending double their turnover and not sustainable. You can't put players through that. You've got to think about players' welfare. I think we absolutely need a salary cap coming in. If you get more people in the ground, you get more bums on seats, then you can spend more. You get more revenue, you can spend more. We make it sound difficult, but it's really that simple.
Episode of the Rugby League Outsiders Championship Show, the only Rugby League Championship show filmed outside the traditional heartlands. It's also probably one of the only championship shows on the YouTube at the minute. Yeah. This episode is sponsored by yourclubstash.co.uk, the home of Pavida teamwear. So if you're looking for kit for your grassroots club or professional club, get on yourclubstash.co.uk and tell them the Rugby League Outsiders sent you. So we're back for another championship show. I'm joined by Mark Austin, as usual, my co-host.
Good evening.
And I've also got Widnes Vikings director, is it, Matt?
Yeah.
Matt Roberts, who's also been on the show before, so second attempt on the show. You get a hat-trick ball, I think, if you've been on it three times.
Let's make sure that happens soon.
Right, so we're going to delve into all things Championship Rugby League. Mark, as my championship expert, I'll hand over to you on tackle one. Where we're going with tackle one?
Well, I thought we'd look at the season so far. I mean, last year when we spoke on a couple of the podcasts and we knew the changes were afoot, we weren't sure how it was all going to pan out. I mean, we're only a few games into the season. Some clubs have played 5, some have played 4. It's a little bit difficult to see how it looks on the table, but I'm going to say it's heartening to see some of the old League One clubs really fighting it out towards the top of the Championship.
Yeah, so there's a few bits to talk about here, isn't there? Because we have got a very lopsided fixture list. We've had a few teams sort of either go bust or go into administration. So, where do you want to start with it? Should we just start at the top of the table and work our way down?
Yeah, I can do. So at the top of the table, currently we've got London, who are probably going to be there all season. They've had every fixture they've had so far. They've put a number on teams. They're quite close when they played Widnes' first game of the season. Quite close when they played Oldham, but I think they've just kicked on from there, haven't they?
Yeah, 100%, mate. So 100% win ratio for London. Matt, you played the Broncos earlier on in the season. I was there that game.
Yeah.
How did you guys find it?
I thought we probably played them at the right time because I hadn't had any pre-season. I think a lot of them had come over from Australia, and I thought we put a lot of effort in for that first 40 minutes. I think you were there and saw that.
Yeah.
And then just that quality that they had, and that's what money buys you. They had a halfback who's going to Perth next year. They had the proper, we played State of Origin, so that quality and then that physicality just caught up with us, and they just blew us for the first 20 minutes after half time, and you just couldn't keep up with that. I agree with you too that I can't see anybody touching them.
I mean, we talk about physicality. I mean, the Championship is all about physicality, isn't it? I mean, when you got Super League players who drop down a division, they comment on it's not as fast as Super League, but it's definitely physical. Yeah. I mean, they've got a lot of Papua New Guinea players who've come over, and that's what they're all about. They're all about the speed, but actually they just get stuck in and they'll smash any players. And
it's the unpredictability of them as well. These Papua New Guinea guys are big, strong players, and you don't see that in Championship. You don't really see it in Super League at the moment. So, it was a real eye-opener for us. But we came away from it and we learned some lessons of where we need to be better. And clubs will. Clubs will. I think Oldham ran them close, but I can't see anybody beating them this year. They were probably one of the best Championship teams I've ever seen.
I agree. Yeah. That's pretty easy start to the show, isn't it? Right. Yeah. Widnes in second, Barrow third, Doncaster in fourth. So...
Yeah, Doncaster have had a bit of, I want to say, shaky start to the season. They had a defeat a few weeks ago at Hurricanes, which was a shock, but it wasn't because Hurricanes, they've invested quite well. And like we were saying last few years about York, they had a bit of a difficult start in the last 2 seasons, but then they find their feet and eventually they rise up the league, and I think that's what Doncaster will do. They can't not rise up the table with the quality of play that they've got.
Yeah, I agree. they've signed very well in the off-season. They're littered with quality, picked up a lot of players from Sheffield who did well last year. A really big pack, as we just said about London, Championship is physical and they've got some good players off the back of that. I think them and Barrow are probably one of the two people who will be in and around there. They look a really good side this year, Doncaster.
Yeah. And then you've got Sheffield after that. I mean, last year they finished, I think it was about 8th. Really disappointing season for them.
An awful season last year, didn't they?
They did. But I think now Lingard has been there a year. He's now, I said last year, it's going to take time, isn't it, for Lingard?
Yeah.
He's now got more of his own players that he wanted in. They've had quite a lot of changes to the squad. He knows what he wants. He knows what works well in the Championship. And I think they'll do well this year, Sheffield.
Yeah, I agree. I think it felt like that they needed a little bit of a fresh start this year. It feels like a fresh start for them. They had to they got rid of some players and they brought Lingard in, allowed him to get the players he probably wants. And on that 4G pitch there, it's not an easy place to go to. I know Widnes play on it, but other clubs struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be there or thereabouts. They've signed some Bradford players who did well last year as well. I think Kieran Gill's there.
Jordan Lilling. Kieran Gill's a strike player.
These are good players, and they've always had a big side as well going there. So I think they'll be one to look out for.
Definitely.
I'll just probably worth mentioning at this point, this show has been recorded first week in March, so it may not go out until the second week of March. We may have had a couple of fixtures, so don't jump in the comments, you lot, and start telling me the league table's wrong. We just, we may be a little bit behind on the division. Right, so that top 5 then.
Yeah.
Is that what we expected?
I think so. Barrow again last season with Halifax. They took everyone by surprise. So I'm not surprised to see Barrow doing really well at the moment. Again, like last season, let's see how the season pans out when injuries set in. But I would say that top 5, they're all old Championship clubs from the previous year who did quite well last year. So I'm not surprised. But then after that, you've got...
I'm going to say this is where it gets interesting, isn't it?
It does get interesting.
This middle section of the table, there's teams that were in League One last year and they're now sat mid-table, just outside. Is it playoffs this year?
Yeah, well, as it stands, there's 10 teams in the playoffs at the end of the year.
Madness.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
Anyway,
but you've got Dewsbury, Midlands. You've got Rochdale, Keighley, Newcastle occupying the other half of those playoff spots. Am I surprised to see them there? No, because the way the Championship fixture list is hitting this year, not everyone plays each other. In case people didn't know, not everyone plays each other. It depended on where you finished up last year.
Yeah.
So if you're one of the stronger teams last year in the Championship, you'll play the stronger teams home and away this year with some regional fixtures. Yeah. So you are going to see a bit of a skewed division this year, but it's great. I think it's great. I think it's really positive for the Championship to see those League One teams having a chance to compete up in the top.
I absolutely agree. I think I went to go and see Midlands a couple of weeks ago, and they played Batley, who are always a very strong Championship side, and and they beat them convincingly and handsomely. I think what it shows is those ambitious Championship clubs, Midlands, Hunslet have also recruited very well. Dewsbury are always a strong side. Keighley have done well, so they've got something to play for as well. And when they're in those fixtures where they're playing, probably half old Championship clubs from last year and half League One clubs from last year as well.
Yeah.
That means they could be in and around in those playoffs, and then they're able to entice players there because they're winning, and that always helps with confidence. So I think that middle table is going to be very interesting how that ends at the end of the year.
So we'll probably go on to the fixtures and all the rest of it after we've just gone through the rest of the league table, and then we'll have a bit of a debate and discussion about that, because it's certainly interesting. So obviously, Newcastle are doing well. Oldham, right, 11th in the table. This is a standout to me. I asked you guys, do you think that's what we expected from the top 5? You both said, yeah. I'd have gone Oldham second or first.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I probably would have expected Newcastle, given their link in with York.
Yeah.
And I think they've signed some players who were top of Championship, probably go to Newcastle. Oldham are probably the surprise for me. I know they've had some off-field issues, but I think...
you can say that again.
I think Mike Ford left and then assistant left. And
then they got kicked out of the stadium.
Yeah, they kicked out of the stadium and they're playing
and then they made a statement online and started having a go at the fans.
And, so I think it's been a bit of a turmoil for them, and they've signed some very experienced players on probably big wages, and they probably haven't hit the heights that they want them to. I've been very surprised with them. I've seen them once this year, and they looked an okay size. Probably lacked that bit of a cutting edge. But I'm very surprised, and I thought I would see them, given the players they've got and probably what they're spending. If I was guessing, they're probably up there.
So you say you're surprised. I'm not surprised for the reason of the way the fixture list is formed for this year.
Yeah.
So Oldham, that like Widnes, they've played London, right? That's one defeat. I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna put me neck out there and say every team's gonna get beat by London this year.
Yep.
That played them, right? Then they played Widnes. We were at the game the other week, and I was surprised at Widnes and how well we did. They've got some really decent players at Oldham. They play a really quick game. But you've got to keep an eye on your defence as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
So Oldham played Widnes, and so they've got tough fixtures, just like Widnes, just like London, just like Barrett, and then these League One teams coming in, they're going to be in the mix as well.
Yeah, but like you say, some teams have got easier fixtures than others. Will go into that. So I'm surprised where Oldham is at. Gould. Yeah, they're doing all right. Mid-table. North Wales doing all right. Mid-table.
I thought North Wales by now they'd be a bit further up. I thought they would have had a better win percentage than that, rather than the 50%. But again, they're going to have a stronger fixture list than some of the weaker League One clubs from last year,
because they finished top of the table.
Top of the table. Yeah. But they've invested well. They've got a few additions from into last year's squad. It might take a bit of time for them.
Hunslet's 15th, Batley 16th. Now, again, we could talk about fixture list, but that's a little bit of a surprise to me. Two championship sides right down that bottom end of the table, or certainly down there anyway. Yeah,
I'm surprised at Hunslet. I know they played Rochdale a couple of weeks ago, and they've got some loan players in, but I think on paper they look a really good side. So I'm surprised where they are on Batley as well. As I just said earlier, they've always been a really tough side to go to, especially at their ground with that hill. So I'm surprised at them, but I think over the season they'll probably end up being there or thereabouts. They're always tough. They'll probably recruit some players in mid-season. They've got a good coach there now, in Jonathan Ford's there, and they've signed some of the old Featherstone players. So I think they naturally will just come good. I think once their pitch becomes a bit harder and they can play a bit quicker rugby, I think they'll be up there or thereabouts.
Yeah, good stuff. And then obviously down the bottom end of the table, Whitehaven 17th, League One last year, Salford 18, Workington 19, Swinton 20th, and obviously Halifax bottom of the table. Good news, we do still have Halifax. We're going to talk about that a little bit further on in the show, aren't we? Bottom end then, Mark, what you expected?
Well, Salford, they picked up a win the other week, didn't they? Yeah. And I'm so made up for them because they knew they were going to have some dark days this year. But there'll be some championship clubs will be thinking Salford easy pickings because they've got a load of loan players. But we know from last year with Salford, with all the loan players, that can actually create a bit of a siege mentality. It can actually spur them on because these loan players, they want to prove to their parent clubs, we're worthy of a spot. Don't forget about us. So it's really good to see Salford win the other week, and they played against Hunslet, beat Hunslet. Hunslet will be disappointed, but then Hunslet, they've had some decent results. I'm going to talk a little bit about why the table might be skewed as well. It's because of the situation with loan players. Salford have got a lot of loan players. York have loaned a lot of players out to Newcastle. And so we just got to expect that this year. I'm really happy for Whitehaven because I just know, I've said it on the previous podcast, I know just how hard they are working on creating that community club and using a lot of local Carla, Cumbrian players.
You're going for a shout out again. You got mentioned on their social media after the last show,
didn't I?
Do you remember it?
Got a soft spot for them.
Yeah. And then Swinton, I feel for Swinton because again, they're another club who are just trying to build the right way. There are some clubs that they are building, but they're building with the benefactor. These clubs don't have that benefactor, so they're just trying to be sustainable.
I see some good stuff coming out of Swinton actually, like certainly on their social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, I understand that they're really big into their women's team and their under 18. So I think they're a club who are looking at not necessarily their first team being the be all and end all. They're looking at other teams that they can bring and bring more that community feel, which, as you just said, Mark, these sort of clubs, they don't have big backers. They're relying on their local community. Whitehaven's a great example. Amateur lads going in there and finding the step up quite tough. Swinton are signing some local players, people who've fallen out the system, and it's a big step up and tough. But it's it's good to see that these clubs are trying to be sustainable, live within their means, so that at least we can fulfil fixtures and ultimately protect the integrity of the competition of the championship.
Yeah. So these clubs are, IMG's gone quite quiet, but they're not doing all of these things for a tick box. They're doing it because genuinely that's how you build the clubs and how you build sustainability.
It's all about survival, really, at the minute. Within the championship, if we're going to be completely honest. IMG points, don't worry about them for the time being.
But they are doing things that do well on IMG, but they're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And that's how, like I say, that's how you do it without the benefactor.
Right, should we just talk about the fixture list then on this bloody league this year? We spoke about the championship fixture list last year, and we heard that this was what we're going to come in, and we went, that's mental.
Yeah,
we went, that is absolutely bonkers. And what hasn't helped now is that we've had obviously we've lost Featherstone. Salford have had their issues, and Halifax haven't played a few games for a while, and it's just created an absolute monster of it's so lopsided is the fixture list. So we've just gone through the teams there and gone, are they where we expected them to be, and all the rest of it. Really, we could just throw that out the window because all teams are playing in a different division. Really, it's in my opinion, it's a little bit crazy.
Yeah, I think the way the table looks now, you've got the top 5 teams from the championship from last year, sort of at the top. Then you've got the stronger teams from League One filling the rest of the spots. There'll still be a bit of movement in there, but I think the top 10 as it is at the moment, you won't see much of a change because the stronger teams, even though they're playing strong, they will beat the other teams they're playing against, if that makes sense. But it is.
Well, what you want at the end of the year is a league table that reflects who are the best teams and who are the worst teams.
Yeah.
Not some teams in the middle of the table because they had a load of weak fixtures to play.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the table doesn't give any weighting for lower fixtures. But saying that, though, there's no easy fixture in the championship. But I agree with you. I don't understand why. It works in any other sport why you just don't play each other home and away. At the end of the season, it's the team at the top is the best. Well, and it goes down from that.
I'll put this on you, Matt. You might not want to answer this, or if you don't want to, you don't have to. But apparently the clubs voted for this. This is what the clubs wanted. Was it on the Widnes boardroom table? Were you guys happy with this setup?
I think it's fair to say that we would like to have played each other home and away. I think given where we finished last year, we got quite tough fixtures, and considering there's only the top 10, there were probably some teams who got lesser fixtures without being disrespectful to teams, and that means that they would finish above us. So, for example, someone could finish with a 75% win rate, and they played most of the the old League One clubs from last year. Yeah. We played most of the championship clubs from last year, and we could end up 50%. That doesn't necessarily mean that one team's better than the other. It's just how their fixtures have fallen.
Yeah,
and I just don't think
that's my gripe with it.
Yeah, and I just don't think it provides an accurate reflection of the season.
Having said that, I initially said to you, didn't I, 10-team playoffs is stupid. Actually, now I'm listening to you speak about win percentage ratios, and actually, at least when you get to a playoffs then, and it's top 10, you can prove your worth, can't you?
I think to try and make it as far as possible, they had to have this 10. It's bizarre, 10 teams in a playoff. But I think it just creates that. It's like they do in Scotland in the football. Everyone plays each other home and away, and then they play each other again, either home or away. Then they split the league in 2, and then they have like a mini season amongst the top, and then the bottom they have a mini season. I think this is what it could turn out to be like.
Yeah, almost. Yeah,
but I think the RFL, they're between a rock and a hard place, I think, because you can't in rugby league you can't play 19 games away, 19 at home, right? To play each other home and away. But personally, I think they should have just done every team plays each other, whether it's home or away. There you got your fairness.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Right, that's the league table then. We'll move on to tackle 2 then, and Mark's pulled out a few standout results from the opening round of the championship, opening rounds, should I say. Yeah. So, Mark, we're starting with first Midlands, Newcastle, is it?
Well, the way we've just been talking about the fixture lists, and it's all a bit skewed, but some of these teams have actually come up with some surprises. So the first round, we had a great result for Newcastle, who finished at bottom of the League One last year. Won no games at all. First game of the season, they beat Midlands.
And that's because of you believe it's because of the ties that they've got with York. And York have tied in with Penrith, aren't they?
I think you might be able to elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, so they are linked in with Penrith as well.
Not that I'm suggesting Nathan Cleary's playing for Newcastle or all like that, but
I hope he doesn't play against us. But I think they're trying to go down the model. Clint, who's their owner there, they're trying to go down that model of an NRL setup where an NRL is linked to a feeder club or a Queensland Cup team. And they tried to go around that. They've got a squad of over 40 players. York have, and then the ones that aren't needed for York, then they go to Newcastle, which in theory sounds like a good idea, but the problem is in the season when you pick up injuries, then if York need those players, where do Newcastle get their players from? Can they field teams? Do they have to draft in amateurs like they did last year?
Yeah.
So in theory, in like rounds 1 to 5, it seems like a good idea, but as you go in the season, and rugby league's a hard game, and you pick up injuries, and when you got Challenge Cup added in there as well, and other fixtures, that becomes quite a risky strategy to do. But fair play to them. They picked up their first win against Midlands, who are, as we'll come on to, who are a pretty decent side this year as well.
As a fan of a club in the Championship, I just want to see a squad of players that belong to my club that play week in, week out for us. I think for Newcastle, though, this arrangement is going to work really well, because to attract fans to that club, they want to see that team is winning games.
Yeah, they need something, don't they, to get behind. Anyway,
the difficulty is just going back to a previous podcast where I was asked to nominate like a standout player from each club. King Vuniyawa, I said, would be a standout performer for Newcastle. I don't think he's played for them yet, because I think he's just been with York every week.
Yep.
Anyway, that appears to be working for York, because they're smashing it in the Super League, and Newcastle are doing well as well.
Yeah.
So far, that business model looks like working. On to round 2 then, and you've pulled out Midlands versus Doncaster. Midlands 26, Doncaster 24. Big scalp that for the Midlands club, wasn't it?
An amazing scalp. I mean, the Midlands team, Hurricanes, they've invested well this year, and could you classify that as a shock against Doncaster? I'm not actually sure. I think maybe Doncaster were expecting to go to Midlands and beat them because they've got a very strong, very physical side. So that was a standout result of the season so far, I think, Midlands beating Doncaster.
I think that is the standout one of the year. Doncaster are a really good side, as we alluded to earlier. Midlands on that 4G pitch, they've got some really big guys. Doncaster probably weren't used to the speed of it, and I think that's a really, I still think Doncaster will be there or thereabouts. So for Midlands to turn them over, in round 2 when they hadn't really had much of a pre-season, I think that's probably the most surprising result of the season so far.
Got some great coaching staff as well at Midlands. So, Lee Beattie and Matt Dunning, great set of coaches. Like, I've tried to give an analogy to what they're like, those pair, but they come as a package, them two, don't they?
Yeah.
And great. Good cop, bad cop, that's it. Although they can both be bad cop when they want to be.
Like what I was saying about Newcastle, the fans, to get the fans in, they need to see results. They're not too bothered about who's playing. If they see results, right, I'll go and watch them. Midlands, the fans want to see, results. And so this is just going to do nothing but good for them. I know they've got a low crowd base at the moment, but I know from people I've been speaking to, it's growing and it's growing. And people are coming to Avery Fields that never went to the Alexander Stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll come on to it. But, I went there. I was invited there by Earl a couple of weeks ago, and their setup is much better for them than the Alexander Stadium. That was a big, huge stadium. Miles away from it, but they can build from it. They've got rugby union there, and they can get some of those kids and people potentially playing rugby league as well. I think it's a perfect setup for where they are at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably the ground's not quite what it needs to be yet, but it's a base that they can grow a club around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you know what? The point I took away from it is that rugby league's been secured in the Midlands for another 10 years, 10,
Yeah,
15
yeah.
years or whatever
20
it is.
years.
Yeah, so-
And I would encourage, I went there and they were very hospitable, and I would encourage anyone who's in and around the Midlands to go and just see it, just go and experience it. And I think I was very pleasantly surprised.
Great stuff. All right, on to round 3 then. And Salford picked up the first win of the season, 29 points to 18 over Hunslet, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the results of the season so far, round 2, Midlands versus Doncaster. But in terms of, I don't know, like moral victories for Salford, they've got that win. I mean, I think the fans would have gone through the season thinking, yeah, we'll get beat. But that one, I mean, I saw it's like limbs in the air at the end of that game when there was a streak away try towards the end. It's just fantastic to see that they've got that win for a brand new club, and that's what they are. They're a brand new club.
Yeah, and I think all for the doom and gloom they had last year, and all the hard times they went through last year. I think that win is what they needed. I think they haven't had a great time so far, but just have a club back, it's something they can celebrate. Then to add a win onto that against Hunslet, who are a good side, I think that's really what they wanted.
What's good to see is that the fans are still pretty much sticking with them, aren't they? Obviously, the crowds are going to drop from what they had last year. However, they've still got a good travelling base of supporters. And, a lot of championship clubs, I imagine, would be quite envious of the fans that Salford have got following them.
Absolutely. They've always had a core fan base, and they stick by them through thick and thin. And certainly as us as Widnes, we're expecting quite a big crowd for them, and that just makes a good spectacle for people for the game, and people want to come down. So I'm really glad to see they got their victory, and that Salford are playing in this year, and seems like the club's going up. They've got Ryan Brealey there, who's Salford through and through. So and good people there leading the club. So I'm happy to see that.
On to round 4 then, and Oldham 12, Widnes 18. Standout victory for Widnes. Surely, 2 Widnes guys here, surely you're happy with that.
I mean, I think went to that game, go into it, I thought, Oldham, decent team.
Did you use your media pass?
I did, yeah.
I thought I recognised him.
But I went to the game thinking, Oldham, they'll possibly turn us over as long as we give a good account of ourselves. And as the first half was going on, Oldham, they've got a great attacking players. The way they shift the ball with speed from left to right, right to left, with the backfield plays and so on. But Widnes just grew into the game, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. When I saw that it was raining and it was a boggy pitch, a forwards battle, I thought this year that's probably where we would come unstuck. But I think apart from the second half of London, we'd be physically dominant this year, and I thought we were in that second half. And then we had 2 very experienced halves in Jordan Abdul and Tom Gilmore, who probably saw that home, and both of them together, I think got us over that line, and it was a really tough victory. Oldham were a good side, threw the ball around, but I just thought we managed that second half better than they did. Yeah. And that's just the help of Jordan and Tom Gilmore who got us that victory, and a really big victory. And I think, Mark, you've probably seen there was a lot of fans behind the sticks, and it after a good start season, I think that really showed our fans that we mean business this year, and we can fight it with the big boys who are spending a lot of cash.
You just mentioned Jordan Abdul there. Can I just touch on Jordan Abdul for a minute? What a signing that was for you guys. I mean, when he was playing in Super League only a few years ago, I know he took some time out, didn't he? He's one of my favourite players. I think he controls the game so well. His kicking game, he's top tier.
Phenomenal.
How did you manage to pull that scalp off? How did that come about?
Well, actually, it was so he works with our captain, Matty Fozzard. Yeah, I think they played each other at London as well. And, Jordan had been out of the game for a while, had a bad injury, and he had to take some time out. And I think he wanted to, the question was asked, like, do you fancy getting back in? And fundamentally, he sat down with Alan, our coach, and fundamentally, he just wanted to start enjoying rugby again. He didn't want the pressure of Super League. He didn't want the money he was probably on in Super League. Only 3 years ago, he came runner-up in Man of Steel. Yeah, so, he was a top player. And fundamentally, he just wanted to get that enjoyment back. So, we took a risk on him. It was a risk, considering he'd been out for 12 months. But so far, Mark, I don't know what you think, but I think it's paid off. He's got that game management. He's got that something you can tell. The fans absolutely love him. And the players do. Yeah, he might not be the quickest, but I don't think you need to in the championship. And he's got players around him. But his man management has been brilliant. And if you get to what we did, Tim Holmes, our CEO, did an interview with him about his situation last year. And I think if you get to understand him, it makes the story even more even more brilliant for him. And I just think it's been a brilliant signing for us and for the championship as well, and also for rugby league, Jordan Abdul,
we need to be in the game.
Yeah, we need people like that. He's got so much talent, and for that to just go to waste. So I'm just glad. I'm glad he's for us, but I'm glad that he's back in rugby league playing, and we get to see more of that talent that we saw 2 years ago.
He faced online from trolls. I mean, I think I alluded to it when we were at the London game. He's going to be a standout player for us, lacking a bit of fitness. A lot of people dwelled on that lack of fitness and his size. But I don't know if you've noticed recently, no one talks about that anymore because he's just let his rugby do the talking.
Well, when he's putting a bomb up in air, mate, and he's coming down with snow on it.
Yeah.
Look, and I
it
think
doesn't matter what your fitness levels are, does it?
Absolutely. I think it's a realisation of where he's at. He knows he might get into Super League. He might have to sort that side of his game out. But I keep coming back to the whole reason they play is because they enjoy it, and they've got to go out on that pitch and enjoy what they do, with their teammates, and that's when to get back in. And all the noise that we're hearing that he's starting to love rugby league again, and then who knows what next year in the few of the years, because he's got some years still left in him, and he's still a quality player, and I'm so glad that he's back in the game.
Right, we went off on a bit of a side street there, but anyway, we'll go back to round 5 then, and you was messaging me, Mark, weren't you, as this result was coming in. London 106, North Wales Crusaders 18. Now, you know why this surprised me? Because I was at North Wales Crusaders the week before this fixture. I watched them play against Lee Leopards, and they got beat. They comfortably got beat against a Super League side, which you would always expect them to get beat. But the margin was nowhere near what they came in here, and it just shocked me. Did this result?
Well, when I was watching the first half. I mean, obviously, London, they've got the ability to just blow teams away.
But bearing in mind, right, it finished at 106, right? Yeah. I think they did quite well to keep it to that score, because after, 65 minutes, what was it? It was 80s, 90s, wasn't it? I was like, oh my, this is going to be like 120 points coming in here. The
first half, North Wales got dragged into what I thought would happen at the start of the season. With the new directive to the referees, you've got to keep an eye on the speed of the play of the ball, right? That is so inconsistent at the moment. And so referees, you just don't know whether they're going to blow up or they're not. And North Wales got dragged into having a go at the referee for all of this. And so what do London do? Penalty, try. Penalty, try. Because you just cannot let them in. I'm surprised they're letting 18 points for North Wales. I don't think they'd be that happy with that. They'd be happy with the 106, but they let 18 points in.
Wasn't it a hat-trick for Greg?
It was a hat-trick for Greg Eden. Yeah. And Mark, I think you make a good point. They had a Super League ref. I think it was Tara Jones. So as soon, Super League refs, we've seen a quicken it up more than Championship. And as soon as they get on a roll and then penalty or 6 again, I think there was a little bit. I think London were just really hot as well. I think that's probably when it just all clicked and all gelled together. I've had 4 or 5 games. I think, unfortunately, North Wales were on the receiving end of that.
Poor old North Wales. That was one massive victory. One last game then. Whitehaven 20, Rochdale 0. Mark.
Again, it's one of those where you want to see the lower teams come out with some wins to keep the fans happy, to keep the money coming in, because that's how you're going to grow your club. And they want to see success, and so it's really good to see Whitehaven winning.
Yeah. All right. Okay, we'll move on to tackle 3 then, and the re-emergence of Halifax Panthers, which is absolutely. I mean, I can say as a rugby league fan, we're all on this table. Absolutely great news that we've got Halifax Panthers back. At this moment in time, there's still a few details to be worked out as we're recording this show, but by all accounts, the Panthers are back. So, Mark, kick us off with that. What's been going on at Halifax?
Well, so as of this week, they've managed to reform and get a club ready to carry on with the fixtures. So they've got about 2 fixtures that they've got to reschedule. Martin Buchan from the old regime has been a spearhead for the new regime. And there's been some fans saying, well, why have we been deducted -12, but Salford haven't? Salford were just a brand new club at the start of the season, so you can't penalise brand new owners. Whereas Halifax with Martin Buchan, he was part of the old regime, so they've had to take a -12 hit.
There's some consistency there, though, which I quite like, actually. I remember when Bradford went bump in the middle of their season. Exactly the same thing happened. It was exactly 12-point deduction. So that's decent consistency from the RFL, and that's the right thing to do, I think. Not that it's going to make much difference to the league this year, because there's no promotion relegation, is there?
Yeah, quite. And I think I agree with you, Carl. I think there had to be a points deduction. There's got to be a penalty for clubs who rack up debt and then decide then they want to go into liquidation and start again. There's got to be a penalty there to stop that happening, because you set a precedent then. So look, they've got -12. As you said, there's no promotion relegation. Doesn't really mean anything. If anything, it's probably good for them, because then if they finish bottom or lower next year, as we discussed on fixtures earlier, they'll get an easier
run.
Get an easier run next year if their fixture list stays as it is. But I agree with what you said, and it's great to see Halifax back. Nobody in rugby league would want to see them go, and a successful Halifax is key to rugby league and the championship.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember Halifax in the glory years, early Super League? Do you remember it? You're a bit young, aren't you?
Yeah,
I do. Yeah. I do. The likes of Carl Harrison, Kelvin Skerritt, Gary Mercer, the big hard men of rugby league. And they were, I remember seeing games between Bradford and Halifax. I remember one particular point where I think it was Andy Hobson of Halifax stuck his knees into Robbie Paul. They were massive, massive games. I remember, for the older people like me, I remember the late 80s when they were going to Wembley one year after the other. So they were a really strong club. So it's really good to see Halifax back, because you don't want to see these older names go.
No, 100%. They're, one of our traditional clubs. Yeah. And you know what? I love a visit to the Shea as well.
Yeah.
It's a great little stadium. Yeah. It's just nestled in that with the trees all around it. It's I love the stadium. Anyway, what else we got on? Kyle Eastman staying on as coach.
Yeah,
also good news.
Apparently they've got, as it stands at the moment, it's evolving every day. They've currently got about 14 players that they had that haven't got a deal elsewhere, so they're hoping to get those on board. Of course, they're going to, like so, they're going to have to dip quite heavily into the loan market. They're going to have some difficult results, but I think the fans are just so glad that they've got that club. We know from Widnes, I think sometimes you need to take a step back when things aren't going so well and think, we've got a club. We need to understand this is a process. And you being a director of a club, you'll know how difficult that can be to keep the fans on your side when things aren't going so well, but to just get them to understand that we're going through a process.
Absolutely, and the good thing for us out of the Halifax and the Salford and Featherstone situation is that we might not always make the right decision or the decision that the fans want, but we'll always make the decision that's right for the club. I think fundamentally no one is bigger than the club, and no one's bigger than the badge that we represent. So we have to make tough decisions. That means we're sustainable, and there's a club there in 150 years' time when when we're all long gone. So they're not easy, and I think one thing this has done is that it's made fans realise, not just for Widnes but for other clubs, that so they could have been the Halifax, or they could have been the Salford, or they could have been the Featherstone. No one really saw this coming, and nobody wants that. There's a lot of history and a lot of heritage in these clubs, and nobody wants to see anybody go. So I think it's given fans a realisation of how tough actually the Championship is now. Outside of Super League, there's cash flow issues with fixture lists, and there's the cost of running a club. So it is incredibly difficult, but it's made people realise that we are where we are, and we want a club there in whatever guise that looks like. That having a club is the most important thing.
I mean, there's some issues coming out of this. I know Batley, they've registered an argument that they want their game against Halifax to be replayed because we were beaten by Halifax. I think it was the second game of the season or first game of the season. So they want a chance to play this newer Halifax team that everyone else is going to play against. So there's going to be some issues with that. But I think as a whole, we're just so glad that Halifax have survived. Could it have been better if they would have just started afresh in 2027 on a level playing field with everyone else?
In my opinion, I think it's good that they're going to carry on this season, because you leave it another 9 months and the fans haven't watched any rugby.
That's it.
Are you then going to get them back the following year? It's pretty difficult, and you need to keep your fan base engaged, really. And I think that's where Featherstone are going to struggle if they ever do come back. It's a difficult situation.
And I think that they played 2 league games, and again, not going back to fixtures, but not everyone playing everyone. How do you then sort those 2 fixtures out? What do you go on average points percentage, which we did during COVID and when other clubs went out? So I think if that makes that quite difficult. So the fact that they're back in, they only have to replay 2 other fixtures. I think it is Barrow and the game against Salford, I think it was, or I can't remember. So if they can get those in, then I think it's good that we've got Halifax back in.
Yeah.
Anything else on Halifax, or should we move on?
we move on. No doubt in next few days I'll be messaging your car saying, "Oh, look what's happened now." And yeah, so it's just evolving. This is what's happening with the championship this year.
Yeah,
every day is a new day of news.
Right. So we just spoke about Halifax. They've come back. Great news for. But on to tackle 4, and then we're going to look at the financial challenges of the championship. Obviously, we've already had Featherstone being one casualty this year. Salford have just survived. Halifax, we've got them back. There's also been financial issues at wasn't Whitehaven. Was it the Cumbrian sides?
I think every club, even in Super League and the Championship, has their financial difficulties. Some more than others. Some haven't got financial difficulties other than they're staying afloat. Some have got financial difficulties because their expenditure is too high. And that frustrates some of the clubs at the lower end who are keeping their heads above water and doing things the right way. Yeah,
so Matt, I suppose we move over to you onto this one really. What can be done about it? What would you like to see sort of happen to create a financially stronger model for the championship?
I think, in my opinion, we need to bring a salary cap into championship.
Yes.
I think what that means then is that stops clubs who are spending double their turnover and not sustainable, who can pay their debts, whether that's within the game or outside the game. I think it also means that we don't get, we preach quite rightly about player welfare. And it seems like we're playing monopoly with players' careers and livelihoods.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Brad Day, who was at Featherstone, then he went to Halifax, and then he's gone through 2 lots of that. You can't put players through that. You've got to think about players' welfare. I think we absolutely need a salary cap coming in now. What that's based on, I think it still needs to be agreed. Whether it's based on, a percentage of your turnover, that's what you can spend.
Yeah.
Or is there a flat cap for everybody and you're all on a level playing field? And if you want to spend more on that, you have to demonstrate those funds. But fundamentally, we can't having clubs speculating and playing with clubs' futures. So I think a cap needs to come in. I think what that means is that players' expectations probably need to drop a little bit, and we just have to be all championship clubs need to realise that that's what we're in. And if that means that people are sustainable and it means that we can keep the integrity of the fixture list and clubs are still going to be there, then I think I would like to see a salary cap come in. I also think it would make it more even as well. If everyone's in and around that, so that's what I think. I think we probably need to see something like that coming in. It would be difficult to implement because let's say they implemented it from next year. You're signing players this year, so you're trying to sign players who aren't on a cap. So you'd have to iron out the granular details of the transition.
Yeah, have it in some sort of tiered system for year one.
Absolutely, but I think there has to be a salary cap brought in for championship. I think it's a good business model, and I think it just protects the integrity of the championship.
Well, it appears to be working in Super League. I know Super League's not perfect, but we have a salary cap in Super League. Barring Salford, over the last few years, it seems to be working, I would say.
Yeah, I do know online, like going to Super League, there's quite a lot of talk about some of the top. I'm not going to mention names of clubs, but there's some clubs who are millions in debt. But the difference they have is they've got a benefactor who can service those debts. Now, what I'm concerned about with the Championship is that we have got some benefactors. But what happens if those benefactors decide, I can't do this anymore?
Pull the plug and
yeah. And it's happened at Widnes a few years ago with Steve O'Connor. He rescued us. He got us into Super League and said, you now need to take the baton on as fans, take the baton on, still keep coming, and then become sustainable. And we thought, yeah, he'll keep investing. And then he didn't. And then what happened? We went into administration when we got relegated. So I am concerned about some championship clubs. If they can keep the investors happy, then brilliant. But the clubs lower down who have got a model where they've not got a benefactor, they are sustainable. I keep mentioning Batley Bulldogs.
Yeah,
what a fantastic job they do.
Yeah, you can never imagine Batley going into financial difficulty.
But their financial difficulties is that they can't invest as much as other people. But they can't invest and they won't invest because they're looking after the future of the club.
Yeah, and I think that when I think I'll be open about that. When we put a Super League bid in last year, when you're talking about Super League, the investment opportunities completely change. In the Championship, it's a bit more difficult. And having, I think, when we sat down, having one investor is a very risky strategy for that reason, where if they decide the well dries up or they decide that they're bored and want to go somewhere else, you're left with that and who's going to pick up the pieces. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing with clubs. We obviously want more investment in the game, but, in the Championship, certainly outside of Super League, we are where we are and we have to live within our means. And it is worrying that we're seeing clubs who are spending way more than they're bringing in.
Yeah.
And you have to rely on people wanting to keep propping them up, and at some point, personally, I think that will just dry up, and then we might be sat here at the end of the year with another 2 or 3 clubs in the same position, which nobody wants.
Yeah.
Well, looking from the outside in, the one that worries me a little bit, I'll just say, is Oldham. I just see a big flashing red warning light on that club at the minute from stuff that's gone on in the off season. New coach, then another new coach. Statements been put out. Obviously, you can see how much money they're spending just by looking at the squad they've assembled. And then an owner that looks a little bit pissed off online. I'm going to say it whenever I've seen some of his statements. I don't know what you think, Mark.
Every club has got their own individual personality. I'm going to say our club, Widnes, I love the personality that we've got this year. It just seems a buzz. We've had owners in the past or chief executives who've been on social media or done a press release that says, we need people through the gates. And it's like, well, you're preaching to the converted here. And the Oldham chairman a few weeks ago, Bill Quinn, he's putting a fortune into the club. He needs more fans through the gate. And he told them, we need you through the gate. And it's like, well, we're coming through the gate. So what are you doing to attract the other people who aren't coming into the gate?
Exactly. Yeah,
absolutely. I think he said in that statement as well, and we were there, and we'll come on to it, is that the demographic of their probably syndicate holders is probably towards the older and more concessions. Eventually, that will go. So what are you doing to bring those other people in? Because if you get more people in the ground, you get more bums on seats, then you can spend more. You got more revenue, you can spend more. It really isn't. We make it sound difficult, but it's really that simple. Yeah. Your revenue is X. You need to bring more people in the ground, which means then you can spend more because they'll buy merchandise, they'll buy food, they'll buy drink. It really isn't difficult. The difficult bit, and that clubs don't spend much time on, and we have this year, is how do you entice new fans, younger fans into the stadium, who bring moms, dads, parents, grandparents, relatives. That's what you need to do. And that's when they keep coming, they spend more, and then you can spend more on players. Then you become more successful. Granted, it's easier than done.
It is easier said than done. Go on, we're talking about Widnes in a bit, aren't we?
Yeah.
But I'll go on to that bit later on then. So how Widnes are doing it. So, should we move on?
Yeah.
Right, news roundup then. Tackle 5, and Mark's pulled out just some of the big stories around the Championship at the moment then, Mark. What's going on? I've
not got a love-in with certain clubs, but
you love Whitehaven, mate.
Right, I'm fond of...
They're definitely a second club.
I just love the clubs who you just know they're so industrious with what they do. They are striving to be better and better, and they're constantly looking at different ways of bringing in fans, bringing in investment, or just doing things different, or just roll your sleeves up and get things done. Speaking to Whitehaven Chief Executive Lee Butterworth earlier on this week, and he was telling me that for Whitehaven to be competitive next year, they need to find another £100,000. Now that's
a big chunk of cash.
It is for them to be competitive, so that they can grow the club further. Where do they find that? You can't. They've got no benefactors up there that can just chuck in a couple of million quid. So what they're doing things. I mean, they had someone who's invested, an anonymous benefactor, who's invested some money, so they've got a big screen to put at one end of the ground.
Yeah.
Not just so they can have it in operation during the game, but so they can have it up in operation during the summer months, make a big event out of having a big screen, do film nights and stuff like that. So they could have chucked that money at the first team, but they've chucked the money at something that can help them grow the club, bring a bit more investment in.
Whenever I've been up to like some of these clubs up like Cumbria and stuff like that, I don't mean to sound disrespectful about the areas at the front, but some of the towns there's not that much going on. So the rugby league at the weekend, the club is like the epicenter of the town, isn't it?
Yeah.
Almost like it is the heartbeat of the community. So like, Mark says, you're 100% right there. If you can be doing stuff and getting like big screen and doing cinema viewings or all the rest of it, I think it's a really smart move from the club.
I agree, and I think that's where, these sort of clubs, we can't jeopardise them. They're the heart of the community. When you go out there and you walk in, there's kids playing on the pitch, and there's kids playing after the game as well. They're running on the pitch. Back to the old days where in newer grounds you can't run on the pitch because the steward's probably chasing you. So I think they're integral, and they bring the community together. People are probably working all week to wait for that game on a Sunday, and they're looking forward to that. They go with their mates or they go with family members. And I agree, they need to, that they're really, big in the community and fundamental to the community up there, especially in those sort of towns.
And again, another reason why I love these clubs is that when you're in Super League, you're in with the elite. Everyone else, well, you just carry on. I know from being down in the Championship now, I appreciate the players that we've got, the youngsters coming through, getting a chance at these Championship clubs. If you don't look after these clubs in Cumbria, such as your Workington, your Whitehaven, if you don't look after those clubs, where do the players from the strong amateur game go to after that? Do we lose them from the game because they've not quite made it into Super League yet? You've got players in the Championship who take a bit of time to mature and then they're ready to make the step up in Super League. So I think these clubs, such as the ones we've mentioned, they're crucial for the future of rugby league in this country.
And I'll be quite controversial here in that if you have Championship clubs now who don't harbour ambition to get to Super League through IMG, that is a business model. That is to bring kids through or come for the amateur game or have fallen out of the Super League Academy. They have 2 or 3 years in the Championship. That's a tough league to be in. You play against some big blokes, playing week in, week out on tough pitches. Super League club might take a punt on them, especially now going to 14 or potentially 15 teams. We've had it as well. That's the business model because you make money off it, and then you can reinvest that money somewhere else. So I think that's where Championship clubs should be looking at that model of, and you can sell that. Then you can go to Australia or you can go and say, we've got experience of 5 players that we've taken straight to Super League. They're financially better off because if they're in contract, you have to pay for that. But that's why I think most Championship clubs should aim as a model, in my opinion.
And just one more thing about that. I know Lee was cock-a-hoop about, because he was saying fans need to understand that we've got like a squad of 20 players or more, whatever it is, who are from the local Carla leagues. They've not quite made the Super League team, so they are your bread and butter of the Championship. And he was cock-a-hoop about one player that they brought in from the amateur game very, very recently. And he says, look online at the smash. And they've released a video of this young player coming straight into the team and just smashing, not being frightened of the season pros that they're up against Rochdale. So again, that's heartening that they're giving these local people a chance. And what's the next step? Getting picked up by Super League.
Well, we'll go on to this in a little bit, but you only need to look at the 3 promoted clubs this year. They've all got a sprinkling of players who've never played Super League before. We're 4 rounds in, and some of these players are already making a name for themselves in Super League. So we'll get on to that in a bit. Mark, other news stories. What's going on at Batley?
So at Batley, again, another club we often talk about because of their industrious nature. Season pro Luke Cooper, who's been around a few clubs. He was at Featherstone and then he moved to Batley a few years ago. Unfortunately, he's decided to take a step away from the game because his wife is poorly at the moment. So he's looking after his family. The chairman of the club, Kevin Nicholas, he came out and said he's really sorry about it, but what they do at Batley, they've got what you call a pink weekend that Kevin's late wife set up when she was diagnosed with cancer, and he announced, I think, that they just need to raise £22,000 more to make £250,000 since their first pink weekend in 2014, and they're hoping to do that by having a walk from Featherstone over to Batley. So again, a club looking after the players and looking after their situation.
I think that's
great, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, Carl. I think that what goes to show is that rugby league players, they're still human beings. They have lives outside. All the same issues. And that's such an awful situation. That Luke's going through, and it just shows that they're human beings. They're the same challenges that we all have. We put them on a pedestal as rugby players, but they share the same issues that we have. They go to work. So and there's more to life than rugby. I think that's what that makes you realise.
So we go on a Sunday to watch these plays, but like you say, they're humans. So on the 10th of April, they're walking from Featherstone to Batley. So it'd be great if everyone just supported that, put a bit of money in the pocket, donate some money to the club, because it's not just going to the club, it's going to the Pink Weekend set up by Beverley, and hopefully that'll help further families of players.
Yeah, and if we can find a link to that to put some money in the pot, we'll put it in the comments down below, and I'll pin it as the top comment. So if we can find that, I'll put it in there. Right, Doncaster, last one before we move on.
Yeah, Doncaster, they are very, very proud that they've just developed a scheme called the Future Girls, where they're offering rugby league out to children as young as primary age who've never picked up a ball, never seen a game of rugby. That's a way of, bringing more fans in, but it's giving the locals a chance to experience our fantastic game. So I know they're very, very proud of that. You've got Andy Castle, you've got Isaac Miskey, one of their players, and the community coaches going out into these schools. And again, it's another step in engaging the community.
Right, before we move on to our special guest, Matt, then today, I just thought before we move on to the last tackle, I just thought we'd just discuss the 3 clubs that have gone up from the Championship into the Super League. They're all mixing it pretty damn well out there. And I saw loads of comments from people last year, including journalists, all sort of saying these new clubs have got absolutely no chance of going into in the Super League next year. And we said, didn't you, the level in the Championship is actually really good. And you know what? They're mixing it with the big boys already. I don't know what you thought about it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's really good to see, you know, when the Championship was on TV with I think it was Premier Sports, we got exposed to Super League, and then now with that stopped happening, I think there's a perception probably from Super League fans that Championship isn't that great. But one thing that's realised is that, you know, the Championship is a really, you know, Mark, you and I watch it week in, week out. It's a really, really tough league. And actually the gap isn't that big from the bottom of Super League now to the top of the Championship, and that's what they've seen. You know, they've brought some players in, but they haven't completely overhauled their squad. So there's a lot of players in there who still played Championship last year. And equally, those 3 clubs got beat. You know, we beat Toulouse twice. Yeah. We beat Bradford as well, and other clubs did as well. So just goes to show how competitive that is. But it's great, a great advert for the Championship. And it's also great for Super League. You know, you've got new blood in there, and they're not the whipping boys. They're not getting beat every week, and they're mixing it with some people who are spending a lot more money than they are, and also have had the opportunity to develop Super League clubs over a longer period of time. You know, I think they were told and got given, you know, not that long, say you're in Super League, and they're still learning each week on the field and off the field. I think it's brilliant for the sport and brilliant for the Championship.
I think the standout one for me, I think Bradford have obviously brought in quite a lot of new players who, some have got Super League experience, well, quite a few of them have got Super League experience. York, we knew were already kind of assembling a bit of a Super League squad, but there is a lot of players in there that have never played Super League. But for me, the one is Toulouse. There's so many players in that squad. They're just hardened Championship players, aren't they? And they've been given that chance. Toulouse ain't gone mad and spent a load of money, and those guys are mixing it.
I don't think their squad, right, so they're in Super League, didn't have a great time there.
No,
the squad, when it came into Championship, I don't think it was that much different.
No,
and the squad they've got now is the same, not the same, but pretty much the same as what they had first time round in Super League. They've learned a lot from that. But what I've learned, I'm going to mention Hull KR. 10 years ago, what were they doing? Getting relegated, right? What are they doing now? Well, they got battered at Vegas. They got battered at Vegas in more ways than one. But they've won the Challenge Cup. They've won Super League. They've won the league leaders. They're now world champions. 10 years ago, they were in the Championship.
Yeah,
doesn't that prove that there is life outside Super League, and these clubs that I think might end up being cast aside? Why can't they go on and do what Hull KR have done? I think York definitely can. Well, they've got a benefactor. They've got a lovely stadium. They've got a fan base that hasn't experienced Super League before, so they're all for it. Bradford, I mean, they went out of business after being world champions, and why can't they do that again?
I think all 3 clubs have got a really good chance to be, and I'll be honest with you, I am surprised at how well they are doing. But you know, it's big hats off to the Championship, innit? Really, it shows the quality that they do have in the Championship. And all we're really missing from the Championship, honestly, is just a few more eyeballs on it. Really, it needs that TV deal, doesn't it? It needs that extra promotion.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that the Championship clubs are crying out for. You know, we want to be put on a stage where we can demonstrate what we do, and it's difficult sometimes. You know, we play on days when Super League clubs, so you've got to try and entice those fans in. But, if we get given the opportunity, I think the Championship can really show and demonstrate what we can show. And, those three clubs have shown it.
Right, before we move on, just very quickly, Bradford, York, Toulouse, do we think they're all going to finish in bottom three, or do you think they're going to keep going as they are?
I don't think they'll finish bottom three. I think Cass and Huddersfield will have another difficult season because Huddersfield have already got their injuries.
It's already started on it, yeah.
Yeah, and Cass, they've had some injuries to real key players. They'll find it a bit difficult. I think they'll do better next season. But I think those three clubs that we just mentioned, I don't think they'll be in the playoffs. They'll be just underneath because they'll have some difficult games coming up. But I think they're doing really, really well.
I agree, and I think another club that will struggle are Catalan. They've had to reduce their spending because of travel. I think they've got a good 17, but then outside of that, I worry about their strength in depth. So I think they're somebody who have probably realised where they're at. I think they've stopped spending as much because they can't. And I think the model of spending a lot of money on Australians coming over who at the end of their career hasn't worked, and I think they've had a couple of tough results to start the year. I think they will be down there as well, and they'll struggle.
It's not a derby, but because they're 2 hours away from each other, Catalan and Toulouse. If Toulouse finish above Catalan this year, I think that'll send shockwaves through French Rugby League, but I think it'll just be fantastic.
And I'm putting my neck out. I think they will. I think Toulouse will finish above Catalan. I'm putting my neck out.
To carry on how they are at a minute. Right, okay, we'll move on to the last tackle then. And Matt, special guest today, although we have had you on before, we're going to again. Look, you mentioned earlier about what clubs should be doing to bring in new fans. Widnes, everything seems to be going pretty well this year. First question from me is then, what is the club doing to try and entice new fans into the stadium?
I think the biggest thing we've done, we put the Super League bid as I mentioned, and I think the one thing we felt is that our attendances need to be up, and we needed that then enables you to spend more money. Yeah. We had an opening for a general manager, and we hired one of our ex-players called Tim Holmes, who's been in around the game. He's done a lot of welfare. I think it's fair to say that he's just full of passion, full of energy, and the first thing he brought in was that the age demographic of our fans was quite high, and we needed something to entice children in. So we accepted that children won't sit there and watch a rugby league game for 80 minutes. So what can we do to make it not about on the field? So, we've got a Vikings village where, they can go and, and they can go and pass balls with our women's team. They can try our wheelchair team out and they can try that. We bring our local ice hockey team down, they can try that. Again, just trying to bring, and bring kids in. We've started this initiative where they're called ingots, but they're little tokens.
I've seen this, right? I wanted you to bring one, actually. Why haven't you brought one?
I've got some, so I'll bring some next time, but they're little ingots, and, you have to be at the game. There's players and there's fixtures. Yes. So a fixture gets an ingot, and then you volunteers and people around the ground, and you have to collect them, and you get a little bag to put them in, and every player at the end of the game gets 10 of his own ingots, and he gives them to fans. And the idea is then that you, at the end of the year, if you've been to every game at the end of the year, then you get a prize at the end of the year. Again, I had some, and I walked up the stairs of our North Stand where the fans in it. I was at the Pied Piper. I had loads of kids end up swarming around me for these, and they're going crazy for them. Again, something so small and something easy to do has just taken off. We've got a mascot package of, we have Kemiku as our mascot, and then you can be, I think it's called Vinty, who's the little mascot or so, and walk around with him. Again, it should bring in kids out. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I've not seen as many children in our stadium as we had before. It helps when you're winning, but trying to make it not so about on field and bring it off field as well. I think that's the biggest thing that we've done. And just with the help of Alan Coleman, our coach, just bringing passion back to that we've probably lacked for a bit of time, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, Rugby League isn't an 80-minute game anymore. It should be an event. Going back to the days of Bullmania, they set the stall out. Things about 10 years after that sort of like fell away from Bullmania. I think the clubs probably thought we can't invest in that anymore, but I think you've got to invest in that to get the investment back when the fans come through the gate.
I remember as a young fan, the rugby was only part of it. But I certainly remember Bullman turning up on a tank and
going around the pitch.
And the sticker album that you used to be able to collect. Like, it's a similar sort of thing, isn't it? Yeah. So I think those ideas are absolutely spot on.
And
mate.
I thought of Bradford the day because when we ran out, we had smoke coming from the tunnel and very small, and we had inflatable rugby players. And I remember at Bradford, you close the door and then the changing room and the smoke come out the bull's horns. And again, it's just creating that atmosphere and that spectacle. We've got some half-time challenges as well. It's just making it not about the 80 minutes because unfortunately we can't control that as non-playing staff. So we have to control what we can control, and that's all the off-field stuff that we're doing to bring kids coming back. So even if we lose, even if it's cold, even if it's raining, which normally is in Widnes, it's normally raining. They want to come back, and then they bring their family members and they bring their mates, and then that's how you grow. Our first game of the year, we got 4,100 in.
Nice.
The similar attendance last year, we were playing a different team. That was about 2,000. So we doubled our attendance in our first game.
Well, what we've seen from the clubs from the Championship that have gone up into Super League is that obviously if you make it into Super League, your tendencies will double from that. So 4,000 in the Championship is probably 8,000 or 9,000 in Super League, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we did our Super League bid, we looked at our average attendances when we were in Super League, and it was about that. You have a core of probably 6,000 to 7,000 home fans, and away fans, apart from the French clubs, would probably bring 2,000 or 3,000. There's your 9,000 and 10,000. Then we saw our game against Warrington last year. We got 7,500 in. Under lights, that creates a different spectacle. Then you can market that. You can bring investors in to look at that. So yeah, we'd be looking at around that, and we were averaging about that when we were in Super League last year. So we've got that core fan base. We just needed to bring more. We had about 2 or 3. We've now got it to about 4,000, which is great for the Championship and great for us as a club.
Have you got any lasers yet, though?
We did have lasers in our kit launch that Derek Beaumont, so shout out to Derek.
Did he lend them to you?
He lent them to us, and he also lent us, I think we had 2 Lamborghinis outside as well that were Debo, that were branded in Debo, would you believe it? Because Derek can do that. So we haven't got lasers just yet, but you never know. There's lasers and there's fireworks to come.
Yes, nice, man. Any other questions, Mark?
Where do you see Widnes in next year? Do you see us mixing it with Super League, or do you think that's just a step too far at the moment? Because there's rumours going to 15. I think rumours going to 15. It's pretty much nailed on 15 with London there.
From me, the worrying point is if the NRL come in, massive if, I know. It might end up being a shut shop eventually.
That's why
we don't know, do we? So, to me, it feels like this year is a really important year for any clubs in the Championship who've got Super League ambition. Because we have spoke about 16 teams, haven't we?
I can't remember what the document's called, but when they brought out, was it 144 points or something like that?
The strategic review.
It's the strategic review, right? And one of those points was that there's the possibility of going to 16 teams, right? For me, that was, we've got to get our stuff together. All clubs in the Championship, if you've got plans to go into Super League, you need to get your stuff together this season, really. Yeah.
So where do we see us? Do I think we're ready? Honestly, no. I think York, Bradford and Toulouse have shown what you do. I think you have to take it in steps. So if you want to be in Super League the year before, you have to be in a pretty much full-time hybrid model on and off the pitch. With that, you need investment. As I said earlier, what's difficult is trying to attract investment when you're in the Championship. You don't know if you go into Super League because people say, well, I'm willing to invest when you're in Super League. The problem then is that you're then playing catch up for 12 months getting in Super League. I think they'll put it to 16 teams. I think they'll do it incrementally. So I think they'll go to 15, and I'm almost certain London will be in. I think that's all the noise that they're making, and that Sinikimi says that that those guys wouldn't be pumping £3 million on a squad if they're not going to Super League next year. That's just the reality of it, regardless of attendances. And they did put on a good show against us at the start of the season, as you saw. I think if you look then outside of who else could go in there as 16, unless someone comes with a huge benefactor, I think Widnes, with the history of the club, what we've done, again, I might be a bit biased here, our potential attendances that I just mentioned, there's no reason why we can't do. I think, could we go straight in? No, we'd have to go in hybrid and then go in to make sure, because the problem is if you go in that way, you become the whipping boys every week. People get disengaged, and actually then you're worse off being in Super League because no one wants to come and no one's get you see about 60 points every week. So if we got in Super League next year, are we ready? No. 2 years time, I think we could give it a good go. Our plan is that we want to be in Super League by 2030. Again, that got quickened up because of last year. We had some good feedback on that and know where we need to improve, and we're looking at that. Again, it comes back to how much money you've got and how big the pot is to sort those out. And you alluded to earlier, Mark, then the issue is that how much do you spend on your first team? Because that's all that people look at, compared to what you might have to spend to get your RMG points up. Classic example, do you spend 250,000 on getting LED boards in, or 250,000 could buy you 3 top players? As a board, you have to weigh that up. And unfortunately, we're at a point now in rugby league where you have to make those decisions. And as we said earlier, it's not all about on the pitch. It's about off the field as well. So I'd like to think that we would be in that 16. I think, I can't see any other club being that 16th if they did go there. Obviously, investment would help. But I think that's ultimately our aim. We know we're still a big club. We're still a big name in rugby league, and I think that's me taking my rose-tinted glasses off and just being realistic. We get it a lot from other clubs, and when clubs come to our stadium, they're surprised at what we've got. So I think we've got the potential to be in there. I just think it will take a bit of time. We have to ensure it's sustainable as well.
Just one more thing. Yeah, so we've worked so hard each week getting better at doing the Viking clap, right? And I think that's going to take off.
Oh, have you got the old Canberra Raiders clap going?
We've got a Viking clap. I'll send you the link.
Yeah. That's what when it first came out and he tried to get it going, it just wasn't working.
Have you got a big drum?
Yep.
Who does the drum? Is it Chemic?
No, it's not. He's got an assistant called Ben. Shout out to Ben who does our drum for us.
Right.
So we've got that going. That's your Viking heritage. When are we going to have a massive, massive battle on the field? I don't know, between the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons. Maybe a bit of Stamford Bridge type thing going on.
Don't give that idea to Tim, because he'll probably want to look at or find a way to doing it, and he'll probably want some budget to doing it. Go and ask him. I'll ask him. I also want to see Carl doing the frog. I
was about to say, if you ever come up to the club, I don't know, do a show or anything like that, put his name down to do the frog.
I think Carl will win.
I think Craig would be fantastic being like extra ex-forces man. And if you don't know what it is, Carl,
well, he's in the sound booth. I don't know if he's listening. He's turned his ears off.
I want to see one of you do the frog, and I'll be putting your name forward to do it.
I'm up for the frog. I don't even know what the frog is. What are they on about?
I don't know, but you're up for it. Gentleman's agreement done.
Yeah. Rugby League Outsiders coming to Widnes to do the frog. Apparently. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure joining us on the Championship Show again. And you, Mac, thank you for going through all the news stories and all the rest of the detail that you put into this show. Just put a shout out to anybody that's watching. If you've got any questions, please put them down in the comments. We do read them, and when we come around with the next Championship Show next month, we'll do our best to answer them. Actually, let's do a viewer's mailbag on the next one.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're a Championship Rugby League fan, you've got a question for Mark or myself, put it in the comments and we'll do a viewer's mailbag on the next show, and we'll get those answered. So thanks very much for watching. And
can I just say one more thing? If you want to come on and give us your take on things, any club owners or chief execs, then you're more than welcome.
Yes, 100%.
Concur.
Bosh. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, gents.